think it's time.
Welcome, people.
Hello, and welcome to Portland Cocktail Week Distance Learning. I'm Lindsey Johnson. I am the founder of Portland Cocktail Week, and I am so excited to have you all here today because I want to introduce you to these amazing people who have created an organization called 86 The Barrier. All right, it's a brand new organization and it has a really clear mission, okay? And that mission is pretty simple, but it's something that we as an industry, I think, have done a really bad job talking about, and we've done an even worse job solving the problem. So I'm really excited to talk with them a little bit about how we as an industry can try to remove the barrier that language really presents, both in the kitchen, front of house, back of house, across the board, so that we can create more equitable solutions for all workers in our industry. So right, like we all want to talk about this. So get your questions ready. Make sure you're asking them in the comments. I will be checking the whole way through, so please do that. Also, I'm going to need you right now to go, well, maybe not right now, but as soon as you can, go on to Instagram, follow 86 The Barrier, and we're going to have, see right there. Thanks, Leo. We want you to follow the organization. I also want you, the website will be up this week. We're going to send you there in a little bit. And there are ways to support starting right now. But before we talk about support, I want to introduce you to these amazing people who are on screen with me right now. So let's start at the very beginning. Before we talk about the organization, I want to talk about you two. Cameron, can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working in hospitality since I was 16 years old. My mom is a restaurant GM. Like my earliest memories are following her through restaurants, and she's like 7 feet tall in my imagination then. And I was like, I'm going to grow up and be you. But I have worked primarily in the beverage space. I've been behind a bar since I was 18 years old, because in Michigan, that's when I was young. That's when you could start bartending. I lived in Chicago for 8 years, and I've been here in New York for 3 years now. And my passion really is how we can leverage the power that we have in our industry to build more just systems. That, you know, like I always say, I'm a perfectly competent mixologist, but if you want to talk about how to get like awesome products on your bar that are going to support financially and as humans the people who make them from the field to your bar, I want to talk to you about that. And so because we sell agricultural products, many of which are made by people who are not English speakers as their first language. And then we bring those products into restaurants where here in New York, almost 30% of our workforce speaks Spanish as a first language. And then we serve guests who speak a range of languages. Language justice is really kind of an important entry point for how we can make sure that the products that we're selling, because we have this amazing power of getting to decide how people spend their money, are made in as equitable a way as they can be, and that our workplaces also reflect those same values. Because I think a lot of us have pretty awesome radical politics, and then we're not super great at building systems that make sure we're living up to those values. So yeah, that's me. Born and bred in restaurants. Did a little detour in university and came back to it. And I just like to think about everything like an engineering problem. Like, let's find a way to be better humans to each other by alleviating individuals of that like responsibility to generate that on their own.
Absolutely. You could not be more right. And I love the way your brain works. It is a beautiful thing.
The only one I've got.
Oh, I love it. Joanna, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Oh my God, Cameron, you're such a boss. I love you so much.
Right.
Cameron and I actually both grew up in Michigan, just on opposite sides of the state. So I also came up in hospitality. I am the daughter of Chinese immigrants. So the second they got to the United States, it was like open a restaurant and away we go. And the other side of my family is also on the small business side. You know, we owned a roller skating rink growing up, which was really cool. So I got put to work when I was in 4th grade, legally. I assume it's legally. And I also had my first bartending job when I was 18, started working in restaurants when I was 16. You know, and I did everything from washing dishes to bussing tables at a diner to working my way up in fine dining, all the way to get behind the bar. And I've been in New York for over 11 years now, which is pretty incredible. And I've been on the brand side, I've been on the bar side the entire time that I've been here. And, you know, I grew up watching my Chinese grandmother get made fun of for her thick accent and her very Asian mannerisms. And I remember even as a little kid being like, that doesn't feel right. Okay, like there's nothing wrong with her because she doesn't speak English. You know, the woman stands on her feet for 10 hours a day just making dumplings. So I don't see what the problem is. And I realized when I started working in New York that it's the same problem, except on steroids. You know, we are in New York, no offense to any other folks from any other cities, but New York is the epicenter of food and beverage. And it is one of the great loves of my life outside of the arts. In case you don't know me, I'm an actor as well. And the pandemic throwing into light kind of the major disparities that we've all kind of been talking about for years, some of us more loudly than others, some of us more analytically than others, just made me want to do something with all of these years of experience. So.
Well, that is fantastic. It's so good to get a little bit of context to understand how the two of you have approached this problem, right? So you're both pros. You've dedicated yourself to hospitality, but also to social justice. So tell me how the organization got started.
So Cameron and I, we worked an event together like last April, like April of 2019. And that was our first time ever actually being in the same space. We knew of each other, but it was like, oh, this person's rad. Awesome. Let's stay in touch. And then it was the end of April that we had been texting and we're like, let's have like a FaceTime coffee and like catch up like humans. And we got into a discussion about, Cameron's experiences at with the shutdown at the various places that she was running and kind of trying to figure out how to take care of the people that needed to be taken care of most. And then that got us into a conversation about language, and that got us into a conversation about what an oversaturated post-COVID job market looks like. And I expected nothing less because like Cameron and I just talk about that stuff all the time. But I ended up reaching back out to her a couple days later and being like, hey, I have this idea about an emergency English language immersion intensive for furloughed Spanish speakers so that they can get some like interview skills and some language help so that when they have to reemerge into going to find another job, that they have a leg up. And she goes, fun fact, I've been thinking along these lines for years now. So let's talk. And that was at the very beginning of May. And here we are.
Yeah,
fantastic.
I think for me, like this has been something that has been an issue that I've been thinking about for a while. And it like Joanna and I are polar opposites in so many ways. And that I'm very much the like plotting, like I like an idea to be fully formed before I start executing on it, which means I can sometimes like be a little slow to get going on something. And Joanna's like, everything's on fire and we have to solve it right now. And so, you know, I had been sitting on this idea and working through this idea that had actually come out of a conversation that Lynette Marrero and I had like in the lobby of Chicago Style now 2 years ago, and it had kind of been percolating before that. It was like, how do we address the fact that we create systems in our restaurants where the prerequisite for almost any form of advancement is some degree of English language proficiency. And we view communication within our restaurants between native English speakers or fluent English speakers and non-fluent English speakers as being solely the responsibility of our workers who aren't fluent in English. And
giving them no tools, just figure it out, y'all.
No responsibility. We're not going to pay you enough that you can afford a class that meets on your schedule. We're not going to pay you enough that you can afford to only work one job. So where are you going to fit that education into your schedule? And then we're also not going to make that language requirement transparent in the way that we allow people to advance in our restaurant. Because so many of us think that if so many other English speaking and solely English speaking managers don't really think, how much conversational fluency does this person need in order to execute their job? We more think, how much English language fluency and conversational fluency does this person need to make me comfortable? And so if we're not really investigating like how much conversational English and how much tactical English for the workplace, because those are different things as well, does this person need to execute the core functions of their job? And how do we make that transparent to them so that they can navigate those barriers in an effective and tactical way? We eliminate the ability for so many people in our restaurants to advance. But being the person who's like, we can't even talk about the bigger picture stuff until we address this immediate need, which is that we can't change the culture in all of our restaurants fast enough for our colleagues who are suffering right now. And when Joanna was like, it's a crash course, it's this like hyper tactical language that's like, how do you secure a job at a workplace managed in English, and how do you work independently at a workplace managed in English so that an employer who is irresponsible in the way that they view language justice can see you as a worker with value. That was a moment for me that clicked, and I'm like, okay, so this is actually 3 parts. The first part is that English language education that needs to be peer taught, it needs to be hyper tactical, and it needs to provide workers who may be undocumented with a high feeling of safety and reduce the barriers to entry. They can't need to download an app or show up to a building at a particular time
or give us paperwork, like
identify themselves to a degree that they are uncomfortable, because all of these programs exist, right? ENL, English as a New Language programs, exist in every city in America. Many of them have free programming, but by and large, folks in our industry aren't feeling safe accessing them or aren't able to access them because of these different barriers. Then the second phase is like, how do we plant spies? How do we get people who are on this mission with us working in the management structure of restaurants? And so the second phase is Spanish as a New Language education for English speakers, so that we're really leaning into that like reciprocal responsibility for communication, and we're getting people working in a way that's effective. I don't think that we're not naively expecting that we're going to be able to help people create fully bilingual workplaces where everyone speaks conversational Spanish and conversational English, but getting to a place where every restaurant has some sort of functioning Spanglish, if you will, where there's a mutual responsibility to learn enough of the workplace vocabulary that you need in the predominant language that is not English used in your workplace, is kind of where we're looking to get. And then the last piece is bringing the skills that we have as an organization, which includes the translation and language expertise of Nikki Menezes, who is our language specialist, kind of the community orientation and like incredible outreach capabilities of Shirley Mejia, who does our outreach and media strategy with us. And then this like academic cultural understanding of the intersection of Latinx and Hispanic culture with this like English language supremacist, white supremacist culture that we live in, that Stephanie Ortiz brings. And like, how can we actually wrap around workplaces and help them live up to the values that we say we have? Because so many of us have been walking around saying we have these values for so long, but either
not doing anything about it.
Ignorant,
Yeah.
right? And lack of resources and a lack of time, and like the difficulty that is inherent in running small or medium or large businesses, or out of just like a disingenuous laziness, honestly, that we're not actually creating the structures to live up to those values. And so it was an opportunity to both address the immediate need, which is we have an unjust system and people are suffering because of it. And like me extemporizing about the way that we need to change systems doesn't help someone who's suffering this second. With that bigger arc, which is we're not here to fix something about our colleagues who don't speak conversational English fluently. We're here to arm people with tools on both sides of that language divide so that we can just not be jerks to each other.
Absolutely. Well, I think I love this context because I think you've really laid out the problem really well. And I think it's for anyone who wasn't aware of this as an issue, I think they probably are now kind of wrapping their heads around the problem in front of us. Tell me a little bit about how 86 the barrier, you've talked about it a little bit, but tell me in pretty direct terms, like what the mission is and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so our mission statement is literally to decolonize language in hospitality. And the full statement is to decolonize language in hospitality so that all workers, regardless of background, have equal access to professional growth and financial independence. As a community, we are not yet drawing the parallel of direct understanding between language colonization and financial independence. But let's say we have a Spanish-speaking dishwasher in the back, right? Like, if his English skills are not given a place and tools to thrive and to grow, his upward mobility is stymied before he even tries, which means that he will not get to a point where he can spend in alignment with his values. He will not get to a point where he is doing anything beyond, just like the bare minimum scraping by. And like, as somebody who grew up that way, relatable content, and who is still living that life, relatable content. But the ability for us to distill it down, language is knowledge, is money, is power. None of those things are mutually exclusive, and one begets the other. And the hospitality industry is built on the backs of exploited immigrant labor, not just from Latinx communities, but from Asian communities, from communities everywhere. And the exploitation of that labor means that those immigrant communities are trying to raise families in a world where they cannot spend to grow because the language skills are weaponized against them. So
absolutely.
I get heated, Lindsay. I get heated.
I love the passion. I love the fire because you're absolutely right. And I think we haven't spent enough time discussing this specific problem. And I'm so grateful that the two of you and the entire organization has stepped up to make this change. So tell me a little bit about the nuts and bolts. Like, how does this all work? We're talking about a lot of really big ideas. Tell me about how it works in sort of a day-to-day fashion.
Nuts and bolts, Cameron, go.
Nuts and bolts, you're in my wheelhouse. So we're currently in phase 1 of our execution, which is English as a new language education for Spanish speakers. So we are in the process of concluding kind of like our beta round of one-on-one classes. We are in the process of recruiting more instructors. We use the terms partner and compañero, partners working on a project, because to reflect that sense of mutuality that's so important to our mission. So we're recruiting partners who play the teacher role in helping navigate the syllabus and the curriculum of the English language instruction. There will be links to an application form to become either a teacher, a partner, or a student, compañero, in our English language programming when our website is live.
Near the end, we're going to talk about getting involved.
Yeah.
But then there are basically instructional units that are formed, right? So there are meetings between a fully bilingual in English and Spanish instructor and a student who is looking to develop their English skills so that they can secure a job in a workplace managed in English. And so that really is the programming that we're looking to build right now. And that's our day-to-day. Our day-to-day is how do we tweak our curriculum so that it is reflective of the needs of the people who are seeking to learn English for our industry. And then managing those day-to-day interactions to make sure that our participants are able to make it to their meetings so that they can learn, that they are able to navigate learning in the context of a COVID world, which is really flipping hard. We've had folks who have had coronavirus illnesses in their family who are obviously struggling with disrupted work, and many who have been unable to access any form of income, governmental or otherwise, since the shutdown started. And so right now our day-to-day is kind of managing a small educational institution, and working on securing some financial support for our participants, both partners and compañeros, who are suffering because they have not had access to income since March.
Absolutely. It's amazing that you've started this in the middle of a global pandemic and are already making such big headway. So congratulations.
Zoom is a powerful tool.
Oh my God. Ain't no time like a quarantine. Let's go.
Exactly.
I said
it. So tell me about your sort of long-term vision, right? So we've really gotten into the nuts and bolts of how it works today. Tell me a little bit about where you see things headed long-term.
Yeah. So we, and I so appreciate Cameron for this, because like she said, I want to fix everything now. And so having another voice in my ear that is very much like, great, yes, and here's the bigger picture of the impact that we can have. So the goal is, at face value, to expand to other large markets. We're aiming to be bi-coastal first. So we'd love to put down roots in California. And, I think ideal target cities are going to be Chicago, would love to be in Florida, would love to be in Texas. Basically like major immigration hubs, right? Where you have these melting pots of culture and hospitality coming together. And you've got a tangible long-term goal and you've got an intangible long-term goal. The tangible goal is what Cameron was talking about, which is a mutuality of language respect that serves to break down bias and break down the barriers to upward mobility. And again, with the aim of getting individuals spending in line with their values and having financial independence. High tides raise all ships, right? So like one compañero succeeding in this program is going to go affect 5-10 people in that person's community. So we're envisioning this kind of like massive nationwide ripple effect. The goal is to also expand to other languages, Spanish being the predominant, but also, Asian languages, French, Haitian Creole, like there's so many communities that we can be of service to. So we're looking at that as well. And, on the intangible side of things, the idea of a seismic culture shift in an industry that is clinging to its old systems for dear life in so many ways. But like when we say decolonize, it's very, very intentional. It's not fluff language. This is an industry that is supposed to be for everyone. It's kind of like the arts, like hospitality. There are an endless litany of stories of people who say they found themselves in hospitality, whether it was by accident or because they were like, oh, maybe I'll take a summer and bartend. And if hospitality is for everyone, we need to make it for everyone. And that changes day-to-day conversations in the workplace between coworkers, between management and their staff, between owners and management. What does a decolonized ownership of a restaurant group look like linguistically? What does that look like? And there are a lot of things that we don't have answers to, but the overall vision is tactical placement of this program, copied and pasted into big markets with partners everywhere. And it looks like a seismic cultural shift based on decolonization of language.
I love it. And I love how intentional all of the language is from top to bottom.
People say decolonize and they're like, oh, like they like clutch their pearls still a little bit. It's like, no, it's fine. You want this. I promise. You want decolonization.
It's good for everybody.
And if you don't,
get out of the way.
I'm not particularly interested in your input.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But I think so often when we're talking about building organizations, so often, and this is maybe Cameron, your influence, we so often kind of run headfirst into doing it. We don't take the time to sit back and assign the right words and make sure that we're being as intentional as we can with our language. Sometimes it takes just that extra step of putting the right word in the right place so that people feel comfortable enough to come and be a part of the organization or just understand what you're up to.
You should see the two of us getting into the weeds about like one word in something. We have spent hours just on a paragraph of text, and it's been awesome. Like just picking it all apart.
but after my own heart.
I think the other part of it though is that language creates the world that we live in, and the people we're speaking to create the language that we use. And so when you don't slow down and take the time to figure out what power the words you're using have and the way that you can disrupt that and undo it, you can't make change. And so our shift from using teacher-student language to using compañero and partner language actually came out of a conversation with our first round of teachers who said, like, I think that to a certain extent, we were having some difficulties with attendance. And, we were kind of scratching our heads. We were like, this is difficult because sometimes all it takes is a phone call or a text message to say, I had this life thing come up and I can't make it. And Luis Hernandez, who's just so wonderful and one of our just awesome instructors, is like, I think that the teacher language is a little intimidating, especially when we're talking about folks who may not feel deserving of the help that's being offered. And so the decision to abandon teacher-student language and lesson, we don't call our lessons anymore, we call them meetings, grew out of having those conversations as a community and talking about the way that the words we were using were impacting people's experiences and then making decisions to change. And Joanna and I, as people who, have moved in predominantly white institutions with varying levels of ease through our entire educational experiences. And for me, particularly as a white woman who was told that if I voiced my needs, they would be met. It didn't occur to me when initially setting up that language that teacher and student was reinforcing a power dynamic. Even though for me, I was like, oh, we need to get into, when we talk about getting into workplaces, we need mutual instruction where people lower in the organizational hierarchy are teaching people who are higher in the organizational hierarchy so that we can start creating an understanding that Spanish speaking colleagues are leaders already and create the systems where that occurs. Even though I had a relatively nuanced understanding of that dynamic and our need to address that dynamic, I still implemented language that reinforced it. And so if you're not having these conversations, if you're not open to having these conversations, and if you're not willing to have them and not react with that knee jerk, oh, I'm not doing that, then you can't address it. And it required just literally putting our shoulders down, taking a deep breath and being like, oh yeah, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
That language isn't aligned with what we're trying to do. And so that can't happen unless we have a call with Leo and Luis and Amanda and Shirley and the two of us and Roberto on a call where someone's like, I think that this might actually be why that's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's a process.
Absolutely. And until you kind of come to terms with the idea that maybe the way that you communicate isn't the way that everyone communicates, that challenge will always exist. So I applaud you for taking that note and running with it, because it seems to have permeated kind of throughout all of the communication, that at least all the communication I've seen has been very carefully crafted and very nuanced. And it's a lot of the terms that you're using. I'm like, oh man, that's a good one. Maybe we should start thinking about how we incorporate that language here as well. So congratulations.
Well, that's a reflection of also what's happening in the world, right? Like I listen to folks from the Black Lives Matter movement and, Native American, Indian, indigenous folks speaking about language. And like, I've always been a language lover. I've always really been super nerdy and curious about how words matter to some people and how they matter to other people. And I think our ability to be nimble as an organization and change our student intakes, change our teacher intakes, change our press releases, change how we speak on a day-to-day basis, rewire our language is so it's a parallel to what's happening in the world. Like Chalky Tom talks a lot about how people need to stop using the phrase spirit animal, stop using the phrase tribe. If you are not a member of an actual tribe, this is disrespectful, and here's why. And it's that constant repetitive rewiring of how language can both be used to uplift, but also be used to weaponize.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And I think so often we kind of get in our patterns. And I know that in way early days of Portland Cocktail Week and even with camp applications, I was looking around saying, hey, we set this, we set this, standard where we want to have at least 50% people of color coming. And I'm looking through these applications and I'm just not finding it. What are we doing wrong? And we went through and we rebuilt the entire application process with people we trusted and knew who could tell us, hey, so that word's not great. Let's do this instead. And all of a sudden everything changed. And I don't want to say overnight, but it was pretty much overnight. Just changing a few words and making sure that your intentions match your language is so important. I think it's something that we often forget because we always intended for those programs to work that way. But we didn't have the right language in place because I was writing it, right? And as a white woman, I just don't know always what the right thing is to say.
And sometimes you have to embrace the stickiness too. I was looking at our website today in light of the fact, which still isn't launched, thank you, Google. But in light of the fact that we have moved away from using teacher and student language in our programming and had to sit there and I changed the titles on the pages a couple times and then had to acknowledge that it's that not using teacher and student for our initial website landing page actually lends a layer of complexity for people who are just trying to access a service. And that those two realities, the world that we're trying to build and the world that we're living in, have to coexist, because we can get super in the weeds and technical about why we make certain choices from an academic perspective. But if someone lands on our website and is trying to figure out how to apply to receive English language instruction services and they can't figure out where to go, that's a problem. And it's reintroduced a barrier to access that we had intended to tear down. And so sometimes you got to get comfortable with the stickiness and living in the weeds a little bit while we get there.
That's how change happens, right? We've got to go through all the uncomfortable stuff to get there. And you're doing a fantastic job of navigating a really tricky space. And I just listening to all of the little hurdles along the way. What are the hurdles that you see kind of going forward? What are the ones that you're anticipating or the ones you're most worried about?
Yeah, it's I didn't bring my list, but off the top of my head, this is right now a volunteer organization. Cameron and I are not getting paid for this. And we also didn't set out to be what we can do that can make us some money. We just saw a problem and we're we have the skills to fix this. And we have the skills to amass a team that can help us rebuild what needs to be rebuilt. So I think the issues that come along with having as of yet an unfunded program and counting on people with a myriad of skill sets while also trying to respect the cost of their contributions in time. Our leadership team, Stephanie and Nikki and Shirley, are three just incredibly gifted women who have been so generous. And we're having open conversations with them about what equity looks like, what does a corporate structure look like. Our teachers We have Luis Hernandez, Roberto Rosa, Leo Casares, Amanda De La Nuez, and we're going to be onboarding Giselle Alvarez shortly. These are 4 and 5 amazingly talented human beings who come from a litany of different backgrounds, who are like, I subscribe to this and I want to be part of this change and I'm on board. And they are right now volunteering their time for us. So I know Cameron and I are both very uncomfortable with asking people to do things for free, even though we know it's a good cause. Like we know it's important, and we love how much they've invested of themselves into this. But there's that, and then you have the literal logistical issues of scale, right? Like we want to be bi-coastal. Cool. How? So
yeah, and that
it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, and that involved like changing thinking for us, where we're like, what does this look like in the longer term kind of time frame, when 501c3s are actually really make it really difficult to be adaptable. And so, you know, for us, that involved kind of wrapping our heads around like, oh, maybe this looks more like a B Corp, like a for-profit organization, whether or not it ever turns a profit, that has certain values and advances those values. And then we work with organizations in the cities that we are asked to be in by community sponsors there, that are already doing labor organizing and are already organizing around the issues that non-fluent English speakers are facing in restaurant workplaces. And so, you know, longer term, our free programming will likely reside with nonprofits that are already operating in those cities. But for us, there was this initial like, what on earth? Like, how do you manage to do different things at the same time when a 501c3 designation is so restrictive about how you can get your money, how you can use your money, how you can pivot? And when we've talked to organizations looking at providing direct aid to our students, to our compañeros, that has been a really difficult barrier to navigate for our participants, regardless of which side of the instructional relationship they're on. We believe fundamentally that you can't learn if you are worried about where your next meal is coming from. And our aim is never to compete with any of the big relief funds, but that for our participants, that there is a means to say, there is a pool of funds that can be dispersed in relatively small quantities for participants who are facing financial need. And we have been unable to find an institutional partner, so an existing 501c3 who can provide that receipt that El Silencio and Mezcal needs in order to donate a couple grand, in order to receive and then disperse that that funding. And so that's, you know, where we ultimately had to look around and be like, okay, so there are these different mutual aid funds in our community here in New York that are doing this effectively with small dollar donations. How do we reach out and figure that out? How can we look at what support staff is doing in Chicago using entirely self-reported need, where you're not creating a situation that necessitates someone potentially providing documentation of illegal activity in order to help people? Because when you have an incredibly onerous and paperwork intensive application for aid, it does narrow who comes out of the woodwork to claim that aid, because people are afraid. We live in a society that makes people afraid.
You know what I will say though? The great thing about problems is that when you are reinventing the wheel, which we are, and feeling like an island while you do it, the great thing about problems is that anytime a challenge comes up, and for anybody that's watching that's ever been like, oh, I want to start my own thing, I want to kind of launch into a change that I want to make in the industry, like the problems will never stop. You don't get to a point where you peak and you're like, I'm out of problems now. We're 86ing problems. It's very exciting. The problems will never run out. And I swear to God, every time something goes wrong, I look at my phone and I'm like, fuck yeah, let's figure it out. And there's like, can I swear? Too late. But like, there's always going to be a little bit of anxiety about the problems individually, because we are in service. Our entire goal, everything we do, every conversation we have, every step we take is so that we can be in service of those who need us. And not us as like humans, but like us as in what we can give to them. And so at least for me personally, rewiring my thinking to be confronted with a problem and go, this is an obstacle, sure. It's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to rewire how I think. It's an opportunity for me to stand in the shoes of one of our partners who may have an entirely different perspective from mine, because I haven't lived that experience. Every single challenge is an opportunity. So while it's exhausting and stressful, I think if you are stepping out into the world and saying there's a problem and we're going to fix it, if you're not seeing problems as an opportunity, then you shouldn't be in that line of work because you're getting too bogged down in the obstacle. That's my lecture for the day, Lindsey.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. Problem solving is like 80% of every job in this industry. Well, so we talked a little bit about some of the obstacles in front of y'all. How do people get involved to help out? How do they put their hands up and say, hey, I want to be involved?
Oh my God, so many ways. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So excited. Okay. So as Cameron mentioned, as of today, our mutual aid fund is live. So we can receive donations via Venmo or Cash App with those handles. In the name of transparency for our mutual aid fund, we will have a living doc that lists every contribution we get, and it also lists every disbursement that we get. The recipients of the disbursements will have their names protected for safety's sake, because protecting our participants' identity is paramount for us. But we will have a living doc that anybody can access, that will just be out there for the world to see. I also want to clarify that with the mutual aid fund, Cameron and I are not touching this. This is not for us. This is not for us to cover business expenses or like the Zoom membership. It is literally need-based financial assistance so that we can get cash into the hands of anybody that's attached to our program who needs it, especially with the $600 a week PUA benefits running out this week. The anxiety is at a tipping point. So we do need the financial help, because this is, as Cameron was saying, it's really hard to focus on your hour-long meeting with language learning if you're like, is my phone going to get turned off? I don't know. And like, been there, done that. So I can say from experience, it's really hard to focus when you don't have money. The other way people can get involved is that if you are a manager or a bar owner and you have folks who you've had to furlough, or folks who are still working for you who would benefit from the program, please reach out to us. We have student intakes that we can send that are designed to protect anonymity and documentation status. So like, we don't ask, but we're happy to send those out. We're also going to be onboarding new partners, new instructors over the next couple weeks or so. And we're ramping up. Little things that can be done. Just tell people. There is not a single person in hospitality that doesn't know somebody who is directly affected by this, whether it's language bias or whether it's COVID or both. Like that, now we are at the full intersection. And with so many cities reopenings up in the air, like I'm looking at Texas and Florida going, oh my God, what do we do for these people? And New York is now like a bubble. Like we're all just like panicking, being like, please don't come here. But if you know people that could benefit from this, please just like send them our way. Give us a follow on Instagram. We're going to be posting updates and like sharing stories with everybody. And we already love a lot of the communication that's happened via Instagram DM so far. It's been really, really wonderful. But I think those are the big ways. Send us your people or come to us directly if it's you. If you can contribute anything or share the mutual aid campaign, please do. And just like connect with us on the socials and come hang out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There will be a link tree in our Instagram bio that has links to the forms that Joanna was talking about, both for English language learners and English language instructors. And that will be right there for you to click and copy to your professional network, your personal network.
Yeah.
And then our website, I will prevail over Google Tech support.
I know you will.
In the next 2 days. That is like,
well, I'm
listen, we're
personally
gonna
going
do
to
this
ask
together.
everyone who's watching today to go to Instagram, follow the account, definitely follow the account. And
Thank
then
you.
once you follow the account, share the account. That
That's
way
cool.
we can start getting the momentum moving and more people to this amazing organization. I really can't thank the two of you enough. This is such an incredible initiative, and
Oh my God,
you're
thank
doing
you.
fantastic work. We're going to find more ways to support. We're going to keep talking about it and thinking about it. And we're hopefully going to get the whole world on board to removing this barrier, because it's just not, we're past the point where this should matter. We need to make sure that this isn't an issue anymore.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for this space. Like, it's so, we appreciate it so much, just because we're, as you can imagine, we're juggling a lot. So you reaching out and being like, hey, question for you, it's such an honor, and it's incredibly generous. So thank you. And thank you to everybody watching and hanging out with us.
Well, thanks, y'all. It's always so good to see you both, and hopefully I get to see you in real life soon.
Oh my God, at some point in like the next year. I don't,
I'll take this for now, but soon. Thank you all so much for watching, and please make sure that you go like 86 The Barrier on Instagram. If you want to see more videos like this and the video content that we have here pretty much every weekday at 2 o'clock, go follow the page like Portland Cocktail Week. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.